next speaker is Florence Casasus, Flo. Flo has a master's degree in environmental engineering from UC Berkeley. She's a project coordinator of the water program of the NGO Nirapaja in La Paz, BCS, Baja California Sur, Mexico from 2004 to 2009, during which she developed a water purification device for rural areas that has won awards with the World Bank, CNN Heroes, Televisa program, and UBS Visionaries. Flo joined Rancho Cacachilas in 2013 to lead the watershed and erosion control program. Unfortunately, Flo is in La Paz right now and wasn't able to be here in person. However, we have a video that she created describing the work that she's been doing there, and Professor Enrique Troyo from CIBNOR is here with me to help answer questions afterwards. So the USGS was invited to come down to the ranch and do some research. So that video that you saw, that was one of my first times seeing the ranch. That's why we didn't have any results yet. But we did present some preliminary results and findings at the NGWA conference last year on groundwater. And we have a very robust experiment set up to document those changes, which I can tell you just in 1 year have been dramatic. So here's a picture of me standing in one of the gabions, and you can see with Flo, there's also 50 people that are employed putting in structures every day. So if you can imagine how many structures that are being put in, it is truly amazing. And I'd like to invite Dr. Enrique Troyo up to say a couple words, and then maybe field some questions with him.
Good morning, everyone. I didn't know they were going to ask me to be. I was in that movie. Yeah, I come from La Paz, Los Cabos. La Paz is the capital city of the state, La Paz County and La Paz City. And then to the south we have Los Cabos. La Paz and Cabo San Lucas, all Los Cabos, we have the growth rate, one of the highest in all Mexico. So the number of wells for water is just the same. It's the same even 35 years ago. So the storage is limited, and the extraction is more and more. So we have negative numbers. In La Paz, we have minus 13 million cubic meters. In Los Planes, La Paz Cacachilas basin, Los Planes watershed, it's about minus 4 cubic meters. But the government, they say we have great opportunities with the white tourism development, white tourism, more and more resorts. In Cabo San Lucas is growing the tourism. I mean, all are welcome, but the tourism development, they bring workers from South Mexico, from Chiapas, Oaxaca, Guerrero, more and more people. So we need water. So these initiatives of gabions and small dams are fantastic, but we need to replicate in more and more watersheds, more basins. So, well, yeah. I appreciate the invitation. Maybe we have a map here, no? I'm not prepared. So the other situation is in La Paz, towards the south, to Los Cabos. Since the 90s, this explosion of research about El Niño and Niña since the 90s, there was a lot of data analysis for climate, for rainfall, evaporation, relative humidity. Okay, the experts, they said, La Paz and Los Cabos are in a tropicalizing process. So we will have relatively more environmental humidity, but these arroyos, streams are with heavy slopes, high slopes, and we have a history of 200 years or maybe more of overgrazing. So we lost organic matter. These hills, the soil is only medium sandy, compacted soil. There are no nutrients, no nutrients. So on the other side, the concerning side about the plant ecosystems, see, we have cacti, cardon, cholla, pitayas stenocereus, and bicardon pachycereus. So the relative humidity in the early morning is a little bit higher, although we don't have enough data about the elder people, the senior people there. They told us, okay? So the full ecosystem is changing also, with some drought periods, but with rainfall periods. Last year, with the Norma hurricane, we have double, almost triple, double rainfall in all this area. We have an average of 200 millimeters. Last year, 400, 450, some areas 500. Also, we had the Odile hurricane and Lydia tropical storm. So the frequency for tropical storm is more higher, the frequency. So the full hydrology is changing. Good opportunity for recharge. Other concern for do research for conservation of the cacti plant ecosystem. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question
Hello, working? Yeah. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here also and share your experience, ma'am. I have a question about, in the video you showed some gabions that are slowly, I mean, they're leaky weird. They infiltrate through the gabion as well. But there were some images with dams with concrete. Mm-hmm. So what is the difference in performance of why using one or the other?
That's a big difference. So there is some structures in the Rancho Cacachilas and Con in the Los Planes watershed for which they are using some dams. So they're staggering dams to NIDS. So a lot of the weirs that they're putting in are leaky weirs, and so those would be under that category of NIDS, where there's a poster over there if people want to check it out later. But and then there's jute bag dams, there's rock structures, there's log structures, there's wood structures. There's just a lot of structures, and so they definitely are mixing it up. And our study area, we're looking at the impacts of all of those types of structures. So thank you for making that distinction, because it is a great distinction. One is detaining water, and one is retaining water. And so, the detention structures allow water to pass through the structure and go downstream. And we found that actually it creates more water downstream because it's pushing that water down into the banks and securing it from evaporation. So if you want to learn more about that, I have a presentation tomorrow.
Hi, Nick Alman, USGS. Thank you for those great presentations. I'm from Florida, so I'm learning really a lot of great stuff. One question I have is a sort of former stream ecologist. Has anyone looked at the biological connectivity upstream and downstream and how these structures might influence those? Because there is, even though they may be intermittent streams, there is some role of movement both directions, and I didn't know if anyone has actually taken a look at that yet.
We have some research for which we're collaborating with Jan Schipper at Arizona State University and his colleague Heather Bateman. That he's established camera traps at structures and identified. There's some areas in pools that bears and deer like to go to bathe. And he said it looks like they're even playing in the pools that are created by the structures. And in other areas where he has control cameras established, there's some smaller animals, the coati and ringtail seem to like those areas, but I'm not sure if it's because there's no bears there or if they like turbid water. But there's also been some fish studies, and more recently I saw In the Midwest, they're using rock arc rapids that are being installed to allow fish passage and also canoe or kayaking in rivers. So that's something that is also being employed in Rhode Island and all the way to Oregon. So there is some studies showing the potential for fish passages, but that's not my expertise.
I was just curious, with all this infrastructure going in with all these check dams, gabions, the metal that you use, it's very important. Some of the gabion, the metal wire, only has a half-life of 30 years. I know that they claim that if you get the plastic-coated ones, that it might last 100. But even then, these are still temporary. I've heard these check dams referred to as time-release sediment capsules because they're going to fail. And so I'm wondering if there is any thought going into maintaining these things, because you're putting in a whole lot of infrastructure that's going to have to be.
That's a great question too, and I'm going to answer one part of that and then let Valère address another part of that. But I will say that I have studied structures that have been on the landscape without maintenance for over 1,000 years. So there is great longevity associated with structures when they're installed correctly. I have also seen structures get buried underground. The CCC put in 550,000 structures in the state of Arizona alone in the 30s and 40s, and they're still standing today. So although there is the potential for failure that is brought up a lot, there's also the potential for maintenance to negate that failure, and also the long-standing structures that have no maintenance are still there. So there's sides to that, but in installing structures, I generally prefer to do some maintenance associated. I'll let Valère address the gabion, I think.
Well, I would say generally the gabion is buried before it disintegrates the wire. And the one thing that's more interesting to me is the type of wire. If you use, I was looking at this, that they were using structures that the water could actually shift the rocks within it. But there is a wire structure that are squares that they disintegrate, but they don't move, and so that they're much stronger. So I think the bigger issue is not how long it will last, but the bigger issue is the actual movement.
So they do get buried and vegetation takes over to hold that sediment in place.